The previous basket is under review.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Basket Under Review podcast. I'm your host, Eamonn Brennan of Buzzer at EamonnBrennan.com. Also here at Basket Under Review. We have got another great show for you this week with our buddy Tate Frazier from The Ringer. We are going to dive headfirst into the last week's 5-in-5 madness, and we're going to take two separate approaches, I think. We're going to talk a little bit about the overall comings and goings, some NCAA selection committee anonymous comments on Monday that the NCAA had to put out a statement to refute. We'll dig into the details, but it was not a particularly well thought out statement by the person who anonymously gave it. And in dealing with whether guys should be eligible or whether how the committee will deal with them. And then we're going to go down the line and just take our list that we have of 5-in-5 decisions over the past couple weeks here and talk about guys that we think have made a major impact. We got into some of this last week on the Top 25 show that Tate and I put together, where we're kind of, some contingencies for various guys being eligible. But there's plenty of guys we didn't talk about and plenty of guys who have announced decisions in the last, 6-7 days here that are worth getting into and kind of, whether or not they're eligible to play. Big caveat up top. We should, at least discuss them and have the fodder in any case. So we're going to do that. As ever, first, please, a reminder, go to basketunderreview.com, sign up, $10 a month. You support this show directly, allow us to take the time and effort to put it together, which we love to do. You support the other shows we put out, Stats by Will and Jim. The Weekend in a Review guys are doing a great job. Scout team's crushing it. Videos are always fascinating. You get access to all the written stuff on the site. You get access to the Discord where Truly breaks news. There's an app where you can play games. There's just a ton of stuff for your subscription. So it's a great place to be, great community over on the Discord. We thank everybody there already for supporting us. And if you're on the fence, please give it a shot, chime in, chip in, and we really appreciate you for listening and for considering supporting us as well. Also, please support our presenting sponsor, Homefield. We are sponsored by Homefield. As ever, Homefield is your industry leader in game day gear by and for true fans. Our friends at Homefield design and research everything from the fit and fabrics to the vintage logos to make standout gear that defines your game day. Shop the very best of Homefield, like t-shirts, hoodies, crew necks, unique designs for your school. They've got over 180 partner schools, which means there's absolutely something for you in there. Retro style jackets for every part of the season, premium hats with retro designs and a fit for everyone, and just launched the Homefield Stadium Polo, inspired by the bold, vibrant game day polos of the 90s. People should check those out. They look awesome. That's next on the purchase list if my wife doesn't get mad at me for buying too much stuff from Homefield. You can shop the very best in game day apparel for your team now with Homefield. Take 20% off your first purchase with code BUR20 at checkout. That's code BUR20. Check out at homefieldapparel.com or on the Homefield app. Homefield, the official outfitter of Basket Under Review and your game day. Thank you to Homefield, as ever, for sponsoring our show. Okay, Tate, preamble's done. How was your week?
Good week. I went up to Sun River, Oregon, had a nice golf trip up there, and first time up in the Bend area. Really pretty, good stuff. A lot of Oregon Ducks fans out there that were asking me about the football season and the prospects for what they hope is going to be a championship type year. So a lot of fun, and it's the off season. A lot of people are going on trips right now. You got kids going back to school. Some have already started. I know North Carolina they have. My nieces are back in school, but then some people have a little bit more time before we get into the full swing of things. And we got college football, NFL football, and then it's going to be college basketball right around the corner. So it's we're trending in the right direction for sports again, which is very nice.
Yeah, we're down to weeks. You can start to time it now in weeks rather than months in terms of the college basketball season getting back, or at least, us getting to October, which starts to feel like the college basketball season now with more and more exhibitions. So very excited for that. And when the first college football hits, we're on deck. So it's an exciting time. And you're right. The kids are starting to go back to school, which is not a bad thing. Great summer, but you all need to get back in your classrooms.
All the parents are, secretly, applauding and lauding the fact that we have turned that corner. So, yes. School's good. We all love
It's a bittersweet feeling because I love, the kids having fun in the summer and doing their thing and going to camps and going to the pool and all that good stuff. And then by the time we get back from the beach, it's like, all right, guys, off you go. Like, we don't have any camps for you. Go rock for a day, and then you'll be back in school in a couple days. So
it's time to learn again.
It's that time of the year for sure. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna talk the 5-and-5 guys, but first we should talk about this NCAA stuff that I mentioned at the top of the show. Essentially, I'm just gonna read. First, I'll read the quote that Jeff Goodman tweeted around 2 p.m. on Monday. The NCAA. This is from one member of NCAA tournament selection committee to @Field of 68. The NCAA may not be able to threaten teams that use players deemed ineligible by the NCAA, but I can penalize them, and so can other committee members if they want, whether it's by seeding or not even including them in the field. This is obviously in reference to the idea that the committee. There's been this sort of overriding take that people have had since all of this roster chaos, since really last year with like the James Najee stuff sort of started popping off of like, well, why doesn't the NCAA just say these guys, these teams aren't eligible if you play this guy? Why does, just say Alabama's ineligible if they play Bediako? It's like, that's not how it works. But also, certainly the NCAA tournament selection committee can't do that, right? And so I kind of, when I first saw that, the tweet that Goodman posted with that anonymous quote, kind of brushed it aside of just like, yeah, someone's kind of mouthing off. That's silly, but, come on now. But the NCAA felt like it needed to respond to this, and probably because a lot of NCAA basketball sort of media folks were retweeting, being like, wait, what? What are you talking about? You can't do that. That's silly. And so the NCAA put out a statement. The committee chair, Martin Newton, who's from Samford University and will be running the room in 2026-27, said the men's basketball committee's charge is to set up the most competitively balanced tournament possible, selecting the best 44, blah, blah, blah. It is not under the committee's purview to pass judgment on players deemed eligible by an institution, conference, the NCAA, or other entity. A player or coach's availability or unavailability should be considered without prejudice. This is a consistent application to the principles and procedures, yada, yada, yada. So essentially the NCAA found like this quote was enough for them to spin up a statement from the committee chair, basically being like, we promise we won't do this. Don't think that we're going to do this, which I guess is good, and also is just another indication of like how weird things are in this exact moment that we're talking. As we're taping right now, we've had all of these decisions. We've got a big list of guys we want to talk about. We had the guys we kind of alluded to and talked about putting together our top 25s last week when we were, not tons of teams, but a lot of teams had a lot of caveats involved, right? It was just like, oh, if this guy plays, they're here, and maybe they're lower if he doesn't. It just is emblematic of like this very weird, specific moment we are in the middle of August in 2026, where we still don't know what rosters are going to be available. And the fact that I think the NCAA felt like they needed to respond to that is they are very keen on, as ever, whatever the legal battles happening in various courts across the country, and obviously with the Colorado case still undecided, just trying to rein everybody's imaginations in a little bit and like not have this idea spin out of a rogue committee member taking the legal process or the sort of NCAA bylaws into their own hands.
It's fascinating because it feels like the only veiled threat they really have in their back pocket to throw out there to sort of temper these decisions, because it does feel like there is a overwhelming kind of majority opinion in the college basketball world, which is if you can't beat them, join them. And I think that, once the domino started to fall, everyone was just like, well, if they're doing it, I'm doing it. And to think that the NCAA would be sitting in a seating room and have the likes of just the teams that are involved in this process that have the 5-for-5 guys, Arizona, Houston, Gonzaga, Indiana, Carolina. You're telling me that these Florida, recent national champion, you're telling me that these teams are going to get penalized and they're just going to take it and just be like, oh, well, we knew that this was a possibility. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a veiled threat that it's just so far from reality that I feel like it's a back pocket kind of, in a swindle in a sense to get like, and Jeff Goodman obviously is reporting on this stuff and someone tells him something, he puts it out to the people. But I think that they're using him to kind of be a mouthpiece to say, hey, we still have a backbone and we still might, give you some sort of punishment. Watch out for us. And then they can backdoor it and say, hey, don't take that statement seriously because officially our stance is this. It's just a classic ploy to try to remind people that they do have the power, because I think the power seems to be overwhelmingly imbalanced right now. When you look at the table, I know the NCAA has won some cases, but for the most part, they go to court and they lose. And, that's why they're fighting so hard with Congress. We don't want to get into the minutia of that whole situation. But again, to me, this is just kind of a last-ditch effort to show that they have some sort of spine or backbone to do something about these decisions. But in reality, there's too many power players that are already at the table to really do something. So again, I don't think we're ever going to see that be the case. Like, I can't imagine they're like, hey, Arizona's not a 1 seed because they have RJ Godfrey and Chauncey Wiggins joined their team in the 5-for-5 thing, so we're going to dock them to a 2 seed. Like, that just does not seem to me a real plausible reality that we will live in. I've seen crazy things. We live in crazy times. But again, I just feel like this is a classic veiled threat to show that they have some sort of power still. And I'm not sure that they really do, because these decisions seemingly have been made. And, just based on, people that I've talked to, I mean, everyone that's involved in this seems to believe that it's going to happen, and they're not concerned otherwise. So, I mean, roster spots have been opened, money has been paid out and committed to players. And so I think it's a reality, and they're doing their best to kind of fight fire with fire, I guess.
Yeah, it does feel to me like one disgruntled member of the committee who really hates what's happening. And we know who's on the committee. We don't have to go down the entire list. Like, live on the air, people can find, just Google 2026, 27 selection committee. The NCAA puts it out, every year or whatever. But there are, it's a small group of people. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 or 12 people. And you can imagine behind the scenes today, someone seeing that and being like, wait, who told Goodman this? What are you thinking? Like, because it opens the committee up to, as you kind of said, like, say a team with 2 5-and-5 guys gets their seed dragged down, or a team that everyone has in the bracket matrix as a 7 or 8 seed doesn't get in the tournament,
or a team that's an 8 or a 9 seed gets left out.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. This is like a very glaring example of a team with 5-for-5 guys in one of the committee's misses that they do have from time to time, although they've gotten much better, I think, in the last 10 years, really, of like, you don't have the holy shit, how did this team not get in the tournament kind of situations the same way you did a couple of, even 5 or 6 years ago. They've tightened up a lot of that stuff, but there's
enough bracket people out there. Yeah, they have enough information now, I feel like, to pass the test.
For sure. And the way they do it is different, and they're a bit more metrically inclined, and that stuff is all pretty good. And maybe if it decreases surprises on Selection Sunday, that's like not the worst thing in the world or whatever. Also, it's a bigger field this year. We have to remember that. So like, it's going to be harder to miss the tournament this year if you're just average. But if that did happen, and there's this quote out here, and you don't respond to it, and even if you do, there will be some coach or some other AD or some whatever booster who's going to be like incensed and think that it's an attempt, like a backdoor attempt by committee members on the NCAA men's basketball committee to essentially enforce rules that they've been told by a court not to enforce. So you can't have it. Like, it can't be a thing. So I just imagine the emails or text messages going, maybe they've got like a WhatsApp group or whatever, just being like, guys, what are we to like?
Yeah, who's talking right now? Yeah,
who said this?
Shut it down.
Don't be a dumbass. Yeah, like, what are you talking about? Because it does. It's just a bad look at a moment, like I said, that's kind of weird and pivotal, and we don't know. I think you're right. The general consensus seems to be like the guys will be eligible. These 2022 class guys are going to be eligible. Everybody's essentially moving forward. There's a level of uncertainty to it, but if you were to bet on like a betting market site or whatever, it's probably the majority of the money is that they're going to be eligible. And so the NCAA kind of has to start preparing for that world, and the company line has to be what it was in response to that anonymous quote. Because if it's not, the committee doesn't work, and then this, you just expanded the tournament to hold off all of these high major schools and conferences, particularly the Big Ten and the SEC, from thinking about doing their own thing long term, and it will just defeats the purpose if you give the impression that schools or leagues are going to be penalized in some way for following what a judge has told them is that they're able to do. So I just thought that was an interesting wrinkle, kind of a lead in to what we're talking about today, because it speaks to the uncertainty and the chaos, even within the men's basketball committee, about where things currently stand. So that has to be taken all as a sort of an appetizer of like overriding caveat. We don't know if any of these guys are going to play. I think our suspicion is that they probably will, but you could get, it's the 10th Circuit or whatever that's going to hear the Colorado case next, and keeping all this stuff in my head is difficult. The NCAA got a win on Monday in the separate Ohio case. It's the one with I literally think about these cases in terms of like the players, the top 2 or 3 players I know of who are involved in them. And it's like the Ohio case is the MJ Collins one. That's how I remember. That's how I think about it. And so that case, the NCAA got like a stay on the injunction. So in theory, those guys aren't eligible, but all of these guys are eligible because of the Colorado case. All of this stuff is kind of woolly and whatever. And the Colorado case is the thing that matters. So, but maybe you get a less inclined judge or panel in the 10th Circuit that decides that this is actually not what needs to happen, and it gets overturned the way the Bediako thing eventually did. And this is all for naught. We acknowledge that up top. But it is worth at least considering, given some of the decisions that have been made by players since we last did the podcast.
Also, we'll learn from college football. Like Stephen Daly is a perfect example for Indiana. He's one of the best defensive pass rushers that we saw last season. He gets hurt, and then he announces that he's going to use his 5-for-5, and he's going to come back and play for Indiana, and he's going to be playing in 2 weeks. So, I mean, that's the other part. Some of these 5-for-5 guys, like football is going to be the first test to see, are they okay? Are they going to be able and, willing to play or whatever? And so, I mean, we're gonna get that answer pretty soon, it seems like, and maybe those guys get pulled out later if decisions change. But even that's going to be fascinating, because it's like, what happens to the records then? It's like, what if Daly has 5 sacks and is a big part of, Indiana? I know their season doesn't really get started till like week 5, week 6, but, let's say that they beat USC late in the season. Stephen Daly's incredible and helps them win the game and has a forced fumble and big plays, whatever. And then December 1st, they're like, actually 5-for-5's done. And you got guys that have played a month of college basketball and almost full regular season of football. Like, what do you do with the record books? What do you do? You know what I mean? Like, all of that just seems like such a headache. And that'll be fascinating too.
Yeah, I think it'll be the Bediako thing, where it's just like, the court said we can do it, so we can do it. And then when they say we can't, we won't,
right.
And we just, like, it's up to the various committees. Obviously on the basketball side, it's the selection committee, and we just talked about them. But, in theory, they treated
I don't think Alabama got penalized at all. Yeah.
Not at all. No. And nor should they have. I mean, other than they didn't at all. And mostly, I think, because they were 4-4 with Bediako. It wasn't like they went on an 8-game run where they were tearing people up and then Bediako got pulled out again and they started scuffling. Like, they were not noticeably better with him. He played fine. He wasn't like a game-changing type of thing. And so the fear around him was not like borne out. It was more of the sort of overriding theory that had everybody upset, and kind of Nate Oates' general tact during the entire process. But I think that's probably how it's going to be handled. But yeah, it would be interesting to see as college football gets going, is like, if someone is cautious about it, just in case, you know what I mean? Like, we're week 1, we're playing, some team that we're going to beat 73-0, whether we have our 2 best guys, whatever the case may be, just hold them out anyway, just in case there's some potential repercussions. Or, I don't even know, like, if the football committee, that whole process seems like even more opaque and difficult to understand.
And it's not the NCAA either, so we can't get any precedent set on like them, penalizing a team to not make the playoff because of, playing a certain player. And I use Daly not to pick on him, but just because he's probably the best 5-for-5 guy in football. So he's probably the biggest name that's going to be returning. There's not that many guys that are going to change your season. in that sense. So that's why he's one that stands out. But I mean, we can talk about the basketball guys now, but I just think that's fascinating. That's going to be playing out like in a couple of weeks too.
Yeah. And it'll be, talked about a lot every time. Who was the Texas Tech quarterback that was doing the gambling stuff?
Brennan Sorsby.
Yeah, Sorsby, that's it. We talked about at the time how that was going to be like the awkward broadcast, like we have to mention this and then move on immediately and get back to calling the game thing. There'll be a little bit of that with the 5-and-5 guys too, just throughout the season, like reminders, like, oh, and yeah, this guy's, this is on his 5th year and court case and blah blah blah. You'll probably hear it a lot, and then they'll go.
Especially if he's making plays, which Daly probably will. I mean, he's a stud. So that's the only reason that I think he might be the one that gets like the poster boy treatment for the 5-for-5 in football. But again, I don't think they care as much, to be honest, about those decisions because there's so many players that can, like basketball. Having a 5th starter or a big the pieces on the board are a lot less than they are in football. So it's a little bit different conversation.
Yeah, it's the difference in the games. I mean, the difference in the NBA and the NFL. It's like, you get one of the 5 best players in the NBA, your team's floor is super high, even if the rest of the roster kind of sucks. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, if you have Luka,
you have Jokic, you're going to be all right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If you have Doncic and 4 stiffs who can kind of shoot the ball, like you're probably going to go 500.
That's the Lakers' philosophy, I think. That's what they were going for.
Yeah, a bunch of white dudes who can shoot the ball a bit, and one of the best offensive players in the world. Okay, well, let's talk about the college basketball guys then, because obviously that's where our focus lies. And a relatively big decision. I think we kind of knew when we talked last week. We didn't get into it a ton, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure we mentioned him, but it was kind of in the water that Seth Trimble was likely to be going to Louisville. He announced that, I believe, last Wednesday. That he is going to play at Louisville for his 5-and-5 year. This feels like kind of a big one. Maybe if not the biggest 5-and-5 decision, but like up there with the potentially most impactful, with a possible exception for me anyway, because we've seen it already. We know the fit. We know how it works with Darian Williams at Texas Tech. Like that one probably is number 1 for me if we had to rank these on a sort of an impact.
A 5-for-5 power rankings. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We could do another rankings and just go down the list and, 150 guys deep. We could do a 4-hour podcast maybe one day. But yeah, Trimble's a big deal. It feels like, or at least it certainly a proven ACC impact player who I think, to me, there's some questions about roster fit now with Louisville. But I can at least envision him as a Pat Kelsey player, if that makes sense. Like the individual fit player to system transition there makes a lot of sense because I feel like Seth Trimble does a lot of his best stuff in the open floor. He's not the trickiest half-court offensive player, but if you can get him out running in space, he's more useful. But I am curious what that lineup would look like, assuming Trimble's eligible. And again, we're just going to caveat, assuming these guys are eligible in terms of impact. Like, what do you make of Louisville adding Seth Trimble? Because we talked about them last week, and we're like, hey, this is a good team. I like Louisville. I like what they did in the portal. There's a good fit here. They got all their guys from proven high major places. They clearly dropped a bag in getting Flory Badunga right out of the gate, and then Shellstad and Alvaro Folgaris. Like, this team makes sense. Does Trimble... Is he a particularly like disproportionate add to you, or are you maybe share some of my like how do you fit all these guys in type of thing?
Yeah, it does feel like they have 6 starters for 5 spots, and maybe Pat Kelsey has already, especially with the payouts for these guys, like they're paying 6 starters, I would assume. I mean, I guess Fulgaris might be the guy that gets put on the bench just because he's been there before at Iowa and kind of, made his name in the NCAA tournament this year against Florida, of course, that big shot that he hit, and also just had a great tournament overall until, that last game. But in general, he's probably the one that's the easiest to move to the bench, I would assume. Woolley, we talked about, positionally would maybe be the guy that would end up going to the bench, but I think that they brought Trimble in simply for defense. I think his on-ball pressure is the reason why he is such a commodity and, the kind of the reason why he had so much interest interest from Louisville and some other programs out there. It is a weird thing for, North Carolina to see Seth Trimble go play for Louisville in the ACC, a team that they're going to have to play, especially when you think about sort of the sell for Trimble when he was at North Carolina is, hey, his brother JP played at Carolina. He grew up being a Carolina fan. He always wanted to be at North Carolina. He's got a Ben and Jerry's on, Franklin Street. He's got all these different things that kind of sell the dream of like, I'm a Carolina guy through and through. Obviously your coach gets fired. There's a lot of, late in the process, I think Malone kind of just told him, hey, we don't have a spot, or we don't have the money to pay you for a spot, to be quite frank. So this makes a lot of sense for Seth Trimble. This was a business decision. It's either an exhibit 10 with the Wizards or go back to Louisville, get paid a lot more money. And I think that's sort of the fascinating breaking of the brain that we've seen just in our, conversations and in college basketball at large, is that going back to college is actually financially the smarter move. And I think we grew up with, the opposite of that, where it was like every time a guy even was considered to be an NBA prospect, it's like, you got to go get your money. You got to get it going. You got to start the process to getting to that second contract as soon as possible. So I think it's just like the perfect example of the changing of the times. I think Trimble fits an identity that, like you said, Pat Kelsey wants. I think defensively, he'll be a really good cog in that machine. And my only concern, and I said this to you, is like, is this potentially a bust, combustible situation where you have a lot of guys with a lot of expectations to have a lot of minutes and a lot of shine, and somebody's going to be the odd man out? And how do you keep a group of mercenaries, for lack of a better term, contained as a team with an eye on the prize? And winning will do that. If they're winning games, I think it will all work itself out. But I'm fascinated to see kind of the bumps in the road, the rosters. I would assume it's the Shellstad, Trimble, Woolley, Knox, Badunga starting five, if I'm really just trying to piece it out in my mind. And maybe Knox slides down and plays at the 4 and Badunga. But that's kind of a smaller lineup, though. When you think about the ultimate size of that team. I'm fascinated to kind of see how they work the pieces together. But I think Carolina fans, I'm interested to see it'll be a first time sort of reaction. I mean, Caleb Love never played Carolina again after he left for Arizona. So this will be the first time they have a guy that'll be in conference that is a Carolina guy that they go head to head against. And I just want to kind of see what does a fan do in that situation? Do they say, hey, we like Seth. If he hits a 3 against us, we're rooting for him. We want him to do well. Or does it completely turn the other way, which I assume it would? And I don't know. It's just the world that we live in as fans of the game is, it's a new space. It's a new frontier. So it's fascinating to see what that looks like.
Yeah. I think if I remember correctly, when Mikael Brown played, Woolley was on the bench last year, right?
Yeah.
Like that was the typical, it was Conwell, Brown, McNeely, Hadley, and Frew / Khalifa essentially splitting minutes at the 5. And maybe Woolley is a program guy. He's the big retention piece from their roster from last year, and maybe he's the kind of guy, and I don't know, either way, that you can sell on look, man,
he's a team first guy.
Yeah, you're functionally a starter anyway. I know you probably wanted to start, but it's 2026 and those distinctions don't really matter. It's about how many minutes are actually on the floor to make.
And you'll finish games for us most likely, right? I mean, I think that's always been, that's kind of the new age coach shell. It's like, you don't have to start for us, but we want you to finish the game for us. And then, there's, I guess, something in, being the 5 guys that you trust there at the end of the game. So that may be a sales pitch that works out in the end.
That's a big thing in English soccer is talking about, because there's 5 subs now, and it's like, well, yeah, those guys didn't start the game, but they came on in the second half and they finished it. And that's we don't call them reserves, we call them finishers. And that's, there's something to that where it's like, it doesn't really matter who's standing there. I can go out there and stand for tip off, and I started a basketball game, but if I play 0 minutes like a walk,
we see that. We used to do that with senior night every year. It's like exactly. 5 guys that have been sitting on the bench that start the game, and then they hold it together until we get to the first media timeout, and then they get out of there.
First media timeout
or first timeout in the game, I guess. First stoppage. Just get them out of here.
Slap the floor for 3 possessions and then get back to the bench. So.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, it'll just be interesting to see how it fits in, if who gets bumped and if they need to get bumped. And I do think the sort of skeleton key for Louisville is still Badunga, because I think whether you feel a little small from 1 to 4, however you sort of are allocating your minutes, he is so good individually. And we saw this at Kansas last year. They were not a particularly big lineup around him basically ever, right? He wasn't playing on one of these teams with
Tiller was the
we've got
biggest guy on the court next to him, right?
Exactly. And he was rarely under the rim on the offensive end anyway. So I think there's multiple ways it can work. And if you're Louisville and you've got the money to spend, which clearly they do, it makes total sense, I think, from a Carolina perspective. You're right. It's just like, what are you supposed to do? It's August, you weren't really expecting this to be a possibility. If the previous coaching staff,
you're Will Wade. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. It's just like, for a new coaching staff, particularly a guy who's entering college basketball for the first time, you wouldn't necessarily expect him to be like, oh, and also this contingency plan that we've put in place just in case this court case event that we expect will happens, and a guy that we would like to have back, but aren't like maybe killing ourselves to have back, becomes available. Let's stash $2 or $3 million over here just in case while we're building our roster and desperately trying to get a big from Europe or whatever we need to do. Let's just hold this back just in case this does go our way. Some schools have done that, and some schools, probably Louisville, can just go out and ask the booster, hey man, what do you think about kicking in another 3? And they're like, cool, not a problem, go Cards. And that's the end of the discussion. But it doesn't work that way everywhere. And
not everybody has a Papa John. Yeah,
exactly. And I think if you're a Carolina fan, you probably look at this situation and be like, it's kind of a bummer. I'm a little annoyed, but like, it's not uncommon in this day and age. And if Trimble didn't own his Ben and Jerry's, like, would anyone think twice about the situation? I'm not sure they would. You know what I mean? Like, we're not talking about Tyler Hansbrough here.
Well, I had someone reach out to me and they were just like, do you think it's ironic or funny or whatever? I don't even know what the kind of the feeling would be, but just that 2 of the biggest shots in North Carolina's history this decade, Caleb Love, Seth Trimble against Duke last year, both those guys have been like taken away from you know what I mean? They lose a little bit of a lust to them or a luster because the fact that those guys ended their careers somewhere else. Like I do find that just, kind of another new age kind of new thing to deal with and parse because, Caleb Love is basically by all accounts an Arizona guy, at this point. He goes to Arizona games. He's a Tommy Lloyd guy. He, kind of went back and got his jersey situation ceremony last, you know what I mean? So he's compromised. He's not really a Carolina guy. So, even the Coach K shot that moment now has a weird, kind of different lens to it. And the same thing with Trimble last year, hitting that big shot, huge game for Carolina, game winner. They haven't had many of those against Duke. It usually is Duke hitting the game winner against Carolina. And now that is seen through a different lens because he's going to go play for another ACC powerhouse. So I thought that was an interesting thought experiment there too.
Here's a thought experiment for you. Over under 3 years until a player transfers from one of Duke or Carolina to the other.
I would, we've seen NC State, Carolina, right? Obviously, Abel just did it. Ven-Allen, Lubin did it before. So, we've already crossed that line. So, I think I would say the under. And I think Haminia was one of those guys that Hubert Davis loved him when he was in high school. So I wouldn't be shocked if Hubert Davis was still on staff, they would have gone after Haminia. I'm sure UConn would have won out in the end. But I do think it's more plausible at this point, and I do think it's more of a guy who's like a 8th, 9th guy that didn't get an opportunity at Duke, or like a 3rd star at Carolina that gets, coerced to go to Duke because he wasn't getting the shot, like a Rashad McCants type situation in 2028 or something like that. So I would take the under, honestly. I think these lines have been blurred. I think Bryce, Tiller going to Mizzou is one of those that kind of is in the same frame of I never would think that a Kansas player would go to Missouri, but he obviously thought he deserved more of a shine, a spotlight, whatever. So he ended up going there. So I think the under, which is something I never thought I would say, but here we are.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. You're right about Tiller. It's worth probably putting context on the Kansas-Missouri rivalry is, if not UNC Duke, in terms of classic
It's a lot of hate.
It's boy, do people not like each other. It goes back a long way and has some.
It's
some
about
deep
Kansas City,
historical.
right? Like, isn't it about Kansas City? Like, because Kansas City, one part of the city is on Kansas's side of the border, and then the other part's on Missouri's side. And then
It's part of it.
It's a border
I
war.
mean, it dates back to like the Civil War and incursions by Kansans into Missouri territory and vice versa. Like it's a whole
It's deep.
thing. And I think they were called the J. I'm wading into something here. We probably should pull Wikipedia up at some point to make sure I'm not messing this up. But I'm pretty sure they were called like jaywalkers. Yes, they were militant anti-slavery guerrilla fighters in Kansas during the during the Bleeding Kansas era and the American Civil War. So yeah, it was like the Kansas Jayhawks. That name dates back to like a real serious moment in American history where people were violent towards each other, and so that's baked into the soil a little bit there.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is a heated rivalry, and yeah, the proximity also helps because those are the two places essentially. If you're a Missouri grad and you go to like probably the most likely local biggest city near you, it's Kansas City, and the same goes for Lawrence. So that's all baked into.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to our next player. We talked about Darian Williams with Texas Tech last week. Obviously, that makes a ton of sense. We talked about Denzel Aberdeen. Also makes a ton of sense. Those guys both returning to schools we saw them excel at. Aberdeen will probably have a bigger role than he did for the Florida national title team, but that Florida national title year got him a big paycheck from Kentucky last year. Now he goes back and is probably earning similar amounts of money to play for the preseason number one. One that happened since we spoke was Skyy Clark to LSU, which is interesting because LSU now, assuming Clark is eligible, has, if last count is correct, 5 scholarship players on the roster. So this is big. That's a 20% increase, 25% increase in the number of players available to Will Wade. I know Wade has said, and maybe it was a few months ago now, like by the time school starts, we'll have a good team. But the international clearance stuff that's changed this year, and the sort of weird way he's gone about this whole portal has potentially backfired, and how he's kind of in the position where like Skyy Clark, who is a really good player, I think he's actually had a great year last year and is super useful and the exact kind of guy that LSU should be looking for. You're really hoping for the NCAA to rule in your favor here because they desperately need him and like 5 more players.
Yeah, there was a lot of jokes going around with the Jaden Daniels situation that Will Wade was not getting 5 guys out of respect to Jaden Daniels. He did not want to deal with the number 5. I was hearing reports of that. But yeah, Skyy Clark.
Daniels, that whole number 5 thing, not to sidebar here. I was just looking at fantasy football stuff earlier today, just because like my draft's coming up this weekend, and I'm genuinely loath to draft him because of this. My perspective on him has completely changed. The jokes have gotten to the point where it's just like I don't know if I trust this guy as a fantasy football quarterback. So anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, he's got a momager, and I think she's the one that is protecting the ego a little bit there. But I would like to think that Jaden Daniels probably was like, what is happening here? But we'll see. But yeah, I just thought that was a funny wrinkle when it comes to Will Wade filling out a 5-man starting 5. There's also some jokes that have been made that he could just do what Colin Sexton and the Bama boys did when they went 3-on-5 throughout the season. So maybe if that happens, Skyy Clark can have his Colin Sexton moment to send a message. But just to be serious for a second, Skyy Clark is a really good player, former McDonald's All-American, former 5-star. He's played at a lot of different places. He's had definitely some ups, some definite downs at times. But I thought that we saw like a formalized version of Skyy Clark under Mick Cronin. I think that Cronin was kind of a great coach for him. It seemed like he got him to be more disciplined when he was out there. He made better decisions. Defensively, he was way better on that side of the ball. So like, as far as Will Wade and the LSU version, like if they get that version of Skyy Clark, this is a really good ad for them in the backcourt, and someone that you can actually point to say, hey, we have a real guy here in our backcourt. But I am still a little bit just confused, I guess is the best word, with what the ultimate idea was for Will Wade. I mean, I've heard that he kind of, rubbed some people the wrong way during a recruitment of a few guys throughout the portal that he thought were going to be more of sure thing type guys. And, I know that he's the king of the strong ass offer, but I think there's a lot of strong ass offers that are out there. And that old ploy used to work a lot better than it does now. And I think he's trying to find a way to circumvent and get another edge. And I'm just not sure there's a real edge out there other than this 5-for-5 deal, which is a dangerous game because, as we mentioned in the caveat at the top, it's not guaranteed. This is, players that we end up getting at the end of the day. So, like, I mean, I'll ask you what you think. I mean, what happens if this actually doesn't work out and Will Wade doesn't have a roster? Like, I mean, is he just going to play a bunch of walk-ons? Like that, to me, it's just so insane that there's a Power 4 program in one of the top 2 conferences with so much cachet. They're spending $40+ million on a football roster. They have one of the best women's coaches in the game that competes for championships and at the highest level. And he just got paid a lot of money to go back there, and he might not even have a team. Like, that, to me, is almost underreported as a story. Like, this is an insane. Like, if Lane Kiffin went to LSU and then couldn't put a roster together, it would be everywhere, and we'd be, but for whatever reason, I guess Will Wade's a little bit under the radar down there, or nationally, I should say. But I just feel like this is a huge story, and Skyy Clark is a nice Band-Aid, but the overall story is a lot more insane.
Yeah, I mean, remember RJ Luis? Like, I
Yeah,
haven't
right. Like,
heard
I mean,
anything about him in a long time, but that was
right.
another one of Wade's ploys of, like, I'm going all the way in on the idea that anybody can get eligible. And then the NCAA did the 5-for-5 thing, and I don't know if Luis qualifies under that standard.
I don't think
he
so.
does, and I don't think he would qualify anyway. Like, just getting someone who signed multiple NBA contracts in the way that he has, and is a year past when he got, it just went to college, revoked his eligibility, stayed in the draft, and now wants to come back after a year of attempted NBA basketball. It never seems super likely one way or the other. And you're just sort of like, well, why are you wasting your time? Why are you promising money? Are you, does LSU have to pay him one way or the other, whether he gets eligible or not? That's another thing that is worth considering about a lot of these guys. I assume, say, if Seth Trimble tomorrow is told the court's ruled against you, you can't be eligible, that Louisville probably will still honor whatever agreement they made with him, I guess. But like in RJ Luis's case, is LSU just going to give this kid who was never likely to play another minute of college basketball in his life the chance, like whatever amount of money they promised him back in, March,
May, I
April,
think,
May,
right? He committed in May, yeah.
And then there was Yam Madar, who's a Israel League player who is like 26, 25.
That's been nipped in the bud, right?
Yes,
I mean, we thought
so.
that was insane at the time, but yeah, that one's done.
Yeah, that one was another one of those, like, even if you're the most super liberal in this, in the lowercase L version of the word, about international players, even if you're like an NCAA overseer and that comes across your desk and you're inclined to let every international guy come over because you just love seeing all these great guys playing college basketball, even that one would be like, oh, hold on a second here. This guy's going to be how old?
We can't do this.
In March of 2027, he's going to be 26. Mm-hmm. So that always felt like a weird one too. And so you have this you have this roster that looks like from the beginning it was like all rules off. It doesn't matter. I'm Will Wade, and we're putting together a team of like, international guys and, a few SEC transfers we can poach and, we'll see how it goes. And I think the assumption was like, owing to Will Wade's reputation, he must know something that other people don't know. He must have some idea here of what's likely to happen, whether in the courts or with NCAA rules, or what they'll actually be able to stand up and what won't last and yada yada. And it seems like that hasn't been the case at all. That seems like that idea was incorrect. And yeah, I mean, this 5-in-5 ruling has been a boon insofar, whether they get another guy or not. Skyy Clark is at least gives them a starting 5 of guys we know for sure will be able to play basketball. And that's, him, Bashir, Mo Diabate, Divine Ugochukwu, and Austin Nunes, or Nunes, I'm not sure which pronunciation Austin goes with, but he's from UTSA, and scored 10 points a game last year as a 6'2" guard for UTSA. Whatever, fine, but that's not a SEC starting five, and that's like your team is probably worse than most of McMahon's teams in year one at LSU, which was not the promise, and amid all the hoopla in the spring when Wade was hired back there. So it's a fascinating thing, and we've kind of I think I've kind of avoided talking about it too much because I don't want to go Will Wade overdrive. But you check in every couple of weeks, you're like, still haven't added anybody, huh? I'm checking Jim's roster sheet.
They have five guys that need eligibility, just the same way that they have five guys that have eligibility, and one of them is a pending eligibility. But there's five guys that are just completely, we have no idea. And it's RJ, Niang, Rusic, Desert, and then Santos.
Yeah. And those guys are all international players that I think, a year ago, and I don't know for sure because I don't know the specifics of all of them and how they stack up to a lot of the guys we've seen come over in terms of like time spent in top level leagues, number of minutes played, compensation that they got, you know what I mean? That have been the things that the NCAA set out this summer and said, we're going to start looking at this a little bit more tightly. We're going to have new guidelines for what international guys can be eligible. Whether or not you agree with those guidelines, I think they sound a little bit heavy-handed. It probably depends on the application in terms of which guys are eventually deemed eligible or not. But it's certainly the case that the sort of somewhat free-for-all for international guys that was the standard operating procedure over the last few years doesn't seem like it's going to be the case. And Will Wade kind of doubled down on that idea. And, plus the RJ Luis thing, which was just weird in the first place. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, but it's, Skyy Clark's good, and he's a kind of a player that you need and that most teams would be happy to have. But boy, is he going to be important because good Lord, how many minutes is he going to have to play? How many reserves are even going to be on the bench?
Yeah, I'm going to say, he might be playing 40 minutes a game and taking 20 shots. Right. Which is fun. It sounds fun, but it's not his game either. He's kind of your second or third guard that can handle the ball every once in a while and help you get into your offense. And, he's not a primary guy, or maybe he sees himself as that. And maybe this is his opportunity to be a primary guy. But I think he better would be suited to go to like a contender and be like another piece in the machine as opposed to like being the machine himself. So we'll see.
Yeah. Bashir's a good shooter. Diabate is obviously an effective guy, SEC level wing type of guy. Journeyman a little bit here and there. Yugachukwu, I don't know, man. Fine. But you're staring down the barrel of something not very good if it doesn't work out, and it feels like kind of a gamble that maybe LSU with its resources in theory did not need to take at all. Just go out and recruit college guys who are sophomores or juniors, and you're set. You know what I mean? Like I don't.
And I think he did. I think that's what's so fascinating about it. Like I think he went out and did the old classic portal push, and the results were not great last year when he did that, and he got a really good return, or so we thought when we looked at NC State on paper. So I'm not sure if that hurt him, or if the move hurt him, or or him just kind of being who he is, the grating personality he can be at times. Hurt him, I'm just trying to piece together the puzzle. Like, how do we get to a point where he can't field a roster? Because I did not think that was the case. So I find that fascinating.
Yeah, it's a weird one. And it's going to be really weird if we're still here in a month, whatever happens.
I didn't think we'd be here in August. I thought in August he would have a team.
And that's why I kind of avoided talking about it.
Yeah, like it's first day of classes at UNC today. Like classes are starting around the country, right? If I remember correctly, Eamonn, you have to be enrolled to play on the college team still. So I assume that you would need to be enrolled.
That is part of it. Enrollment is a key factor still.
When you're coming from overseas, that does take a while to get all the things finalized and all the paperwork done. But different strokes for different folks. Maybe LSU can, figure that out on the back end. But I feel like we should be very close to these decisions being known, and we are not.
For sure. Okay, one that we didn't talk about, I think it happened in the past week. I'm not positive, but we didn't mention it yet last week anyway, is Kendall Weaver to Houston,
Yeah,
which
Kendall Weaver. Yeah, he's
Kendall
great.
Weaver, yeah, sorry. I don't like for Texas, okay player, fine, tons of energy, really good defender, kind of guy you like to have on your team, even if on the offensive end you're like, pass the ball now, give it back, okay, pass it back, don't shoot. But for Houston, it's like, yes,
Perfect. Yeah.
perfect. Achieve full self actualization. Become what you are always meant to be. The terrifying dude flying at people on high ball screen traps out to 30 feet. Like, just go wild, buddy.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, you talk about like fit with the program and like the type of player that they're looking for. Weaver is everything that Houston, kind of positions itself to be when you talk about toughness, doing the little things, energy plays, extra effort, all that sort of stuff. Like that is who Weaver is to his core. He's not going to be asked to be like a scorer, obviously, for them. I just think he fits in. When we talked about kind of Samson and not doubting Houston and sort of just keeping them in the top 15 because of who they are in the pedigree, this was not even considering the idea that they could add a guy like Kendall Weaver. So I think if you've watched Texas, you probably saw Weaver doing something good for the most part. I mean, he just kind of could swing games, had a lot of momentum swinging plays throughout, especially in the NCAA tournament. Kind of when you need him, he shows up, and again, he's just tough as nails. And I just think that he's gonna love Kelvin Sampson pushing everybody around him. Like he just seems like the kind of guy that's going to be in the back of the group running, telling everyone that they got to keep up pace and all that sort of stuff. That's just who he is as a player. And I think it's a really perfect fit. And when we kind of looked at this list of guys, I mean, I know there's some more important ones, like you mentioned, Darian Williams probably helps the ceiling of Texas Tech. Seth Trimble, maybe same thing for Louisville. Skyy Clark helps fill out a roster. But I think Kendall Weaver is a real shifter for kind of my view on Houston and who they will be defensively. I know they're going to be really good defensively, but adding him makes me assured that they will be really good perimeter on the perimeter defensively. So I just think that's a really good add.
Yeah, and it's perfect too for them because he doesn't really need the ball in his hands. So
Mm-hmm.
like you don't have to. You're not.
He can if you need
paying
him to.
it.
Like if you're stuck in a
Yeah,
possession, like he can create something, but he doesn't have to be like I need the ball in my hands to make contributions.
yeah, and he's super athletic and he gets to the rim and he flies around and he does good stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to sell him as like this totally unusable offensive player. But that's just, he shot 44 threes last year and he made 10 of them. That's just not what he's about. It's all the other end of the floor. And that's the place where Houston does its best work pretty much every year. So we'll be interesting to see how Kelvin Sampson deploys him and just like winds him up like a toy and sends him out there to just be a total terror, and then come back on the bench and so on and so forth. Really good. Like again, fit wise, and the synergy between player and system is like that maximizes that to the point where
It's a perfect match.
Better,
Yeah.
it's one of the better one of these that we have. Others that have happened recently, BJ Edwards to Oklahoma, quietly a really nice addition for Oklahoma and an Oklahoma roster that starting to look okay. Edwards was maybe famous for the whether or not he was hurt at the end of the year last year, and SMU's ability to get into the NCAA tournament kind of hinged on his injury and how they played down the stretch. I'll always remember him from a Bubble Watch perspective for that reason, but he's a good player. There was a reason that discussion existed in the first place, and Oklahoma is now in a spot where, we're I don't know if we've really talked about Porter Moser as a hot seat guy. I think it's probably, I feel like Porter Moser is well liked. He is respected. I think people think he's a good coach, generally speaking. And I think sometimes you have to go back and look at the fact of how many tournaments they've actually made with Moser and what they've done when they've gotten there. And it's been a bit of a slog, even though they've had basically good teams every single year. He's been to one NCAA tournament. It's when they had a lottery pick in the backcourt, lottery pick freshman in the backcourt. They needed to streak through the SEC tournament to get there because they were 6-12 in the league coming in, and they lost in the first round and didn't get back to the tournament last year. So we're now heading into year 6, and it's interesting with Moser of just like, I think he's a good coach. I think he is running a solid program. I'm not sure that Oklahoma is like a crucible of college basketball in the way that maybe some of its fans would like, and other fans maybe are not quite as interested in. And so maybe that's part of that. There hasn't been this sort of negative impression, but I feel like every offseason now I look back and say, oh, wow, it actually has only been one tournament there, even though I feel like they're usually good. So getting Edwards and shoring up their roster, assuming that holds, when you were previously talking about a backcourt of Xavier Brown and Pop Isaacs, throwing Edwards in the mix is like kind of a huge deal.
Yeah, he was so good for SMU in the ACC. Like, he was a swing player. Like, if he played and he was healthy, that backcourt was with Boopie Miller as well. Like, that was just a tough group to really deal with on both sides of the ball. And BJ was a really good defender on ball as well. So it's a nice addition. I just think that, like you said, Porter Moser to me is kind of in the 7-year itch range where, you keep scratching and now it's starting to hurt. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not really, I'm just not sure it's like going to end up being the right fit at the end of the day for both sides. But like you said, Moser's like the ultimate professional. Everybody knows he's a good coach, but Oklahoma could be looking for greener pastures if it doesn't work this year. But getting BJ Edwards is a huge add. Like, he is a really, really good player. Like, he's a second team all ACC kind of guy last year. So to get him in this sort of deal and backdoor your way into getting a player at that level, that really makes them more of a contender. And it does help that the tournament expands too. Like, it's a lot easier to sell, like, hey, we're trending in the right direction. We've made 2 of the last 3 tournaments. The math is a little bit different than it was with 68. But again, I think that sales pitch may work where he can hang around a little bit. And this might not be the year that it's the time. But like you said, it's year 6 and we're 1 year away from, that's the old Thad motto. It's like, once you've been there 7 years, you fall in love with them and they fall out of love with you. I think that's, kind of where we are in that territory with Porter Moser.
That's a great point about the tournament, because Oklahoma is one of those teams that is perennially
just right there
in the conversation. They're they've never been bad under him. You look at their KenPom finishes, 30th, 54th, 46th, 40th as the year they went to the tournament, and last year they were 41st. And it just ends up being about like digging into the wins and losses. But I mean,
it's like if they beat Texas when Texas is a top 10 team next year, like, that's a resume booster that gets them probably in the tournament, right? It's like one of those games that swings it in the right way.
Right. It's just avoiding what they did last year, which was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 straight losses in SEC play from January 7th to February 4th. Not a good month. That kind of
like what they did with Trae Young, right? Remember that? I mean, that was Big 12, obviously, but yeah, like, they barely made the tournament. They went from like the talk of the town in early January, to like, are we sure they should be in the tournament? They ended up being in the 8-9 game. We've seen that before.
That was a year of one of the all-time terrifying, because like, once I lock a team in Bubble Watch, it's like I'm usually really careful about it, because it's like, you don't then pull it down and be like, oh no, they're back on the bubble. It's like, no, I said they're getting in the tournament, so they're getting in the tournament. Like, otherwise this is pointless. And I locked them like early, dude, like mid-January, when they were 14-2 and Trae Young was just ripping it apart.
Yeah, we had the Trae Young assist counter at the bottom of the screen during his games. Like, he had his own graphic. I mean, that's how good he was.
I remember it well. He was part of the hype machine at ESPN at the time, and it was, it was valid. Like, he was really, really good. But then the team started losing every single game, and all of a sudden they're like, wait, hold on. You get into like late February, like, wait a second. This is starting to get scary. But it worked out in the end. They were a lock, as I said, never in doubt. Who else we got here? Oh, a funny one, actually. I found a story from back in July from the local guys at, I think, the Daily Hoosier, covering Indiana. And they were talking about Sam Alexis joined the Indiana team on their trip to Purdue, and their lead is like, it's former Indiana center Sam Alexis joins up in Peru with the Indiana team. Is he still the former blah blah blah? And DeVries is like, well, it's just nice he was able to make it out, and we had an extra spot for him. Blah blah. It's since been announced he will be returning to Indiana if assuming the ruling holds, and that's not the worst idea for Indiana. Like Sam Alexis was fine last year as the third big on a roster as opposed to what he had to be last year, which was kind of the only true big man on the team. I think it makes a lot more sense and is a nice little rotation addition that they didn't really have, and maybe relieves a little bit of the pressure of like, do we have to constantly play our two star NIL signing bigs together? Can we space them out? How do we space them out? Alexis maybe gives you a little bit more flexibility there, or at least more minutes to spread around. So not the worst thing in the world, even if he's not the impact guy of some of these guys that we're talking about.
Yeah, he's an insurance policy, right? I mean, if one of those guys gets hurt, I think it's nice to have him. And you also have the fouls. I mean, I think really when you look at the best teams in the country and their front courts, I mean, Florida is the one that is going to be the calling card for the entire season. So you're going to need bodies, you're going to need fouls to deal with a team like Florida that's going to bang you inside out. So I just think that, it's a perfect, like you said, third big, 5 fouls, continuity with the coach, continuity with the program. It's like having an adult in the room, literally, because these guys are all very old. So I just think that's the reason why it works out. And if we talked about these guys not being able to forecast is going to happen. I mean, DeVries obviously had some sort of inkling that this was possible for him to be traveling around and still with the program. So, as much as they don't know anything, they knew something. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Like, what? Wait, why are you doing that? So it's kind of funny. He was just kind of like, well, we needed another guy, and he was free after he got done with, I think it was the Thunder or whoever he was with, and NBA Summer League stuff. So
also great experience for all these guys, by the way. Like, when have you ever been able to go play NBA level games in Summer League, work out with an NBA team, get NBA advice, get NBA training, get NBA treatment, and then be able to return to college? After doing all the draft, strength and conditioning program, like, you're going to get the best version of these guys coming back as well, which is also an encouraging sign that, like, hey, it's worth maybe paying, or, in some of the cases, upwards to $3 million for some of these guys because they got all that. I mean, it's like you just interned with the best company in the world for your business, which is basketball. And now you get to come back and, share your better gifts with college basketball. So, I mean, it's a pretty good deal all in all.
Yeah, and coaches, I feel like, traditionally have hyped up some of their overseas tours by being like, look, we're playing against 35-year-old professionals here. They're these guys are paying for paying for their rent and their mortgage, and they're big and strong and physical. So it's a great experience for us. And like, they win by 35 because the guys they're playing are like plumbers or whatever. That's actually a real thing this summer. Like, those guys went off and played with like grown men who are fighting for their NBA futures and then get to come back and play college basketball again. So there's an element of that to it for sure. Ven-Allen Lubin announced he's going back to NC State, which, again, Ven-Allen Lubin, fine player. The Will Wade hype of him last year coming in to the year and the talk about him being misused in previous roles didn't exactly hold up. But he was good.
Used like the exact same way at NC State.
Yeah, he essentially, the sales pitch fell away.
The exact same minutes, undersized 5. The exact same way. So, that was
the same deal. But if he slides down a little bit with this bigger NC State roster that they've got coming in, there's maybe something there. Like, he was good last year with his minutes and what he did. He wasn't like incredible, but he efficient, finished well, didn't turn the ball over. He did some good stuff for NC State. Ven-Allen Lubin was innocent. I don't think he was the problem with NC State.
He was not the problem
that way.
For sure. I thought he played good basketball. He also did for Carolina late in the year prior. So, like, I mean, you've seen flashes. The only issues that you see with Ven-Allen Lubin is, like, he does have these lapses and these moments where, like, he doesn't box out his man. You know what I mean? Like, there's these little things that kind of happen with Ven-Allen Lubin that add up and end up costing you games, especially when he is your primary big. But again, experience helps. I think he's learned probably, at his 4 different stops, Notre Dame, Vanderbilt, North Carolina, NC State. Now he'll be with NC State the longest of any of those programs. So it says something that he likes Raleigh. I think he's a nice player. I think he's a good addition. And, Gainey is, I think Gainey's just the man. So I'm happy for him that this is a guy that can kind of fall into his lap because they needed some help, some additions in that front court. And I think Ven-Allen's a really good one.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it now and they're like front court / wing kind of, Emili Yalaho. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I also said
from
Kendall
Wazoo.
Weaver
Really,
earlier,
he's a really
which was
good
like
energy guy. Yep.
Yeah. The Kendall Weaver thing earlier was like a Ron Burgundy moment of just like, I'm not thinking, I'm just reading off the screen. If you put it in front of him, he will read it. But they've got him who's 6'8", and
we should have put
rangy
Kofi Coburn in front of you.
There we go. Go yourself, San Diego. And then Kyle Evans, who's 6'10", project, like Jim's got him projected, sort of guessing as the starting center there, and Lubin. Again, he's 6'9", undersized, but you could tandem those two guys as a big combo if you wanted to go big. You could slide Yalaho down, McNeil Jr.'s back. They've got size across the roster now, and there's a couple of guys they have projected on the bench. A couple 3 guys, including a JUCO guy, Shaw Hall, who's 6'11". So. Yeah, that was a thing for NC State last year with size, and Lubin's not a true center really, but he does have a role to play in a world where, if you do want to go double bigs and you can make it work, as teams have done, like he's useful in that context. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and he's got more offensive potential than maybe people realize. Like he can play on the block and get you an easy bucket. And he does have a nice package of step through moves. He works well on the block, like I said, pivoting back and forth and getting that little turnaround jumper that he has. So I mean, he has he's not a complete flop out there. Like he's a nice addition and can help you offensively to, share some of that weight that, McNeil Jr. is going to have to carry for that team.
Right. We talked about Jalen Washington kind of sort of in the context of Tennessee last week, so we don't need to revisit him. Amari Monroe at Syracuse, that's kind of interesting. MJ Collins, my shorthand for the Ohio lawsuit, still, who knows. Malik Ewan at Oregon, I think that's been known, right? That's not a new thing.
Another energy guy for them.
Yeah, nice, gets up and down. NJ Benson for Georgetown. I think Georgetown's still looking to add guys. So there's some interesting guys on this list, and then there's some guys that are a little bit further under the radar, and some guys that if they get eligible are going to stay put. Speaking of another lawsuit shorthand guy, Philip Brava Cannon is going to stay at Xavier, which is useful. Yeah, it's there's a wide range of dudes out here, and then there's
and we talked about the Gonzaga guys last week.
We talked about the Gonzaga guys last week.
Brennan and Wiggins, right?
I think that was one of the few with Gonzaga where I was maybe already counting on them being eligible based on where I put them, but I could maybe go a little higher. Whereas if that possibility wasn't even there, the way it was, a month ago when they lost San Superi, it was sort of like I have Gonzaga top 15, but not top 10 type of thing. But yeah, we discussed those guys. And
you got Mark Few getting in the Hall of Fame this past weekend on Saturday.
Indeed.
He didn't seem to be too. Seth. He didn't seem worried about the 5 for 5. He seemed like he was just excited to be going in the Hall of Fame. Yeah.
Yeah. And our buddy, my former colleague Seth Davis, was inducted as well. So congratulations to him.
Nice.
It's an official shout out to Seth. But speaking, of the guys players, there's more stuff that's left to drop. I mean, Jai Lucas went on, I believe it was Dan Lebitard's podcast, and talked about Malik Renew's situation, and I think essentially acknowledged when we figure out what's going on with him, essentially we have a roster spot. We've been keeping the spot open for him. So I think you can factor in once Miami gets any sort of the clarity that Lucas says that they're still waiting on, that he's going to be back at Miami. And that's huge. Like
Yeah.
Renew was awesome last year and will be awesome for them again, even though
They're
kind
gonna
of
be really
feels
good.
like they rebuilt their roster, not necessarily needing him. I think their roster is good either way. That wasn't a possibility I considered when we were talking about them last week, but it sounds more likely than not at this point. That's huge. And then, from I did not have Kansas in my top 25 last week. I heard a little bit about that from the Jayhawks fans.
See, I
Trey
told you,
White.
You always put the blue bloods in, and then they say it's a
I'm
great.
not scared of a little smoke. I had a
They,
respectful conversation with the Discord listeners. He laid
okay,
out the
nice.
case very respectfully. It was all good. We can still agree without being disagreeable, or disagree without whatever it is. It's easy to agree without being disagreeable, I guess. But he was basically saying like there's still maybe some more shoes to drop besides Trey White, which happened since we recorded last week. Kentucky fans are talking a lot. The Kentucky media machine has churned up a lot of Mark Mitchell discussion in the last week or so, which is very interesting. He would be a fantastic addition, although again, you're looking at a little bit maybe. I don't know. I think Mitchell is versatile enough to kind of fit with whatever, but you're looking at maybe a little bit of inching towards what they had last year with some of the who fits in what rotations and when type of stuff. But there are still, there are big guys out there, even though it feels like the rush of decisions has happened since the case. I mean, Jordan Pope, Texas A&M, I think that was Monday. So there are big decisions out there, and some rosters like, for example, Kansas that I kind of poo-pooed beyond Tyron Stokes, and you hear Bill Self talking about. I think he was on John Rothstein's podcast, which were some of his more extended comments of the offseason, and some of it sounded a little bit like, hey, if everything goes perfectly for us, we're going to be really, really good. Like, Tyron Stokes is the best player in the country. We're going to be awesome. But some
Yeah.
of it was like kind of realistic of like, we'll be a better shooting team. We'll have some other flaws, but there's stuff there. So it's worth tracking because there's other. Kansas might be a roster that looks better, in a week or a couple days than I have thought about it pretty much all season.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Self is not going to sit on his hands because, he obviously knows that time is of the essence when it comes to, kind of. I mean, I still think winning 2 titles, the 2022 title, solidified Bill Self, but like in Bill Self's mind, he probably wants one more on the way out, and to get that, he needs a team that can actually compete. And Stokes is super talented, as we've talked about plenty of times. And you get some of those guys back. I don't think he's going to just settle with what they currently have if he's able to add some guys and make it work. So that's a very fair point. I think the Renew thing with Miami is huge news. If that happens and goes all the way through, I think Duke will obviously be the pick to win the ACC. That is like basically a tradition unlike any other at this point. But I think Miami, I mean, Louisville obviously is in that conversation too, but I just think Miami with Renew and Sheldon Henderson and, I mean, they just have like that is a really, really good front court. Like that is a really, really fun team. So that would be huge.
Yeah, Miami's. I had them high last week already, and that was without the Renew possibility in my head. Maybe it was in the back of my mind, but it wasn't really. The Self stuff is interesting. I just want to talk about this really quickly, and then we'll call it. I'd much rather deal with a guy who you have to control the emotions sometimes than encourage it. Self said. He's talking about Tyron Stokes. He certainly got it. I think it's a combination of Wiggins, but also a Josh Jackson. To me, Josh was a dog, and Wiggs was so explosive. Tyron is not as explosive as Darren, but he's a tremendous athlete and so skilled. He's got some dog in him like Josh. I think that there's interesting things to read into those quotes. We'll be a better shooting team. We're not as freakishly athletic, but we're well above average athletically. I think we'll have the most talented player on the floor basically every night we play. That's fairly undeniable in Tyron. We've got pieces around him, but we're unproven. Can Keanu Dawes be a 14-8 guy? Can Tyron do something like Melo did with Syracuse? Okay, now I got to stop you there. That's where we have to call a timeout. I'm not sure that that's the level that Tyron Stokes should be. I mean, maybe aiming for is great, but that maybe we should be expecting. I don't know. Maybe we'll see. But that's like that read to me as like, hey, if we all hit our 99th percentile outcomes, we're going to be a hell of a team. It's like, well,
That's every
14-8.
coach's dream, right? To get there.
Yeah.
I also just
Yeah,
reading, just knowing Self, like the kind of messaging that he does. I think the Josh Jackson stuff. I mean, look, the best workout I have been to pre-draft until this day, and I haven't been to all the pre-draft workouts, but I went to Josh Jackson's pre-draft workout, and I was like, my God, this guy is going to be absolutely freaking incredible, you know?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of stuff off the court that led to his demise, video games, and, he was into extracurriculars that weren't quite, he wasn't a basketball-focused individual, but I think that, to me, there could be some like reading between the lines in him mentioning that name, because he's kind of like, I've seen supreme talents that if, the main thing's not the main thing, it can go the other direction. And I think we've seen some Stokes, signs that could be an issue. So, I mean, I just think that you can always kind of read between the lines and like the implication or the implied meaning of what Self is talking about. And like you said, Stokes could be incredible, but I think he expects him to, make it the main thing. So I hope he does.
Yeah. And I mean, look, if I was Bill Self talking to Stokes and kind of looking at the rest of the roster, which is like some good guys. Blyden is like a really nice player. They'll have some fit there, and obviously, in theory, Trey White is back, so that's a super useful.
That's huge. That's game changer right there. Just having Trey White back.
Yeah, and I was speaking to the subscriber on Discord, asking why I didn't have Kansas ranked when it seemed like a lot of the metric systems were going to have them higher. I said like, look, Trey White was not in that discussion because I didn't know, or it wasn't confirmed yet that was going to happen. There were some rumblings around it, but you never know. And yeah, that's a big deal. That boosts their shooting immediately. Like he had a really solid year last year in some difficult circumstances in terms of,
and was great in summer league. Like I thought he was going to be a nice piece for the Heat, because they need as many guys as they can to actually play basketball for them with the contracts that they have on. So I thought Trey Wright was going to be like a little X factor, plays 30 games up for the Heat next year. So I mean, for him to go back to Kansas is huge. Yeah,
shot 41% from three. Had to play with two different essentially point guards or off-ball guards at different times throughout the year, obviously with the Peterson stuff back and forth with Melvin Council on the ball a lot. So had a really nice year. He's
kind of like a Skyy Clark, by the way. Like he just kind of, his game matured, like if you watched him play in high school, it was a very me first kind of game, and he has figured out a way to like fit into a role, which is really encouraging.
Yeah. You go back and look at a couple of those Louisville teams. They played together for Kenny Payne. Mike James is on that team too. Like,
turns out he had a lot of talent.
They were young.
Jalen Withers,
but there is no reason for them to be as bad as they were at 185th in KenPom that year. That's just absolutely insane. We'll never get over that. And one of the all-timers, but we don't need to throw more dirt on the grave of Kenny Payne. He's had enough. Verbal.
He's happy. He's back. He's back where he's comfortable, sitting next to Cal as the assistant coach. That's Kenny Payne.
It's where it's best. Where it's best for everybody, it seems. Okay, I think that'll do it. We ran down some of the 5-in-5 guys. We talked about a stupid quote that one of the NCAA selection committee members gave, and they surely have just been getting barraged all day with what the F were you thinking type texts and emails from NCAA HQ, and Dan Gavitt's probably trying to look for the mole right now.
Yeah, he's Jack Nicholson in The Departed. He's trying to sniff out the rat.
I've got this rat. It's teething. Yeah, he's that was my Jack Nicholson from The Departed.
It was good. Everybody. Yeah, I liked it.
That's where we are in mid-August of 2026. Talking about a bunch of players who would be super useful and that I wouldn't mind watching play college basketball for another year, but we have no idea whether they'll be eligible or not. That's the podcast for this week. We hope you enjoyed it. We will be back again next week where we will talk about something also having to do with college basketball. That's the promise. You don't know what's going to be every week, but damn sure it's going to be about college basketball and lots of stuff. And I might mispronounce someone's name or read it wrongly. I might mispronounce everybody's names. You just never know. But Tate, that's what we do.
That's the fun. I love it. It's always a good time to talk college basketball. So I'm here and happy to do it, even though, honestly, spending so much time on like guys who are or are not eligible. If you told me this in 2016, I would say, what are you talking about? But 10 years later, here we are.
Yeah, I mean, we said it a few weeks ago during the beach episode. That was just like us venting about the lawsuits and how much they suck. It's just like there's content out of this, I guess, which is not bad for us if you're doing a college basketball website or newsletter or a podcast. But it's also like my whole vibe of like the transfer portal being kind of understandable, and like I'm following it now, like NBA free agency has kind of gone out the window, like to the point where it's just, I have to wait essentially until you think November, but we may not even know then. So who knows?
Who knows with Will Wade? It might be January.
Seriously, he might be. He's just gonna go get the. What's a G League team? I don't even know the name of the G League teams. But
Greensboro Swarm
roster and try to get them eligible. Exactly. There you go. The Fort Wayne Ants.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
they're a team, right?
I know Miami's team is in South Dakota.
The Mad Ants, but they're are they still there? No, they're the Noblesville Boom now. That's tough. The Mad Ants were cool, but anyway.
Also Fort Wayne used to have an NBA team, right? Like back in the day. So
they may have. My the town across the river from me, where I grew up, Rock Island, had one of the first NBA teams, because back then Rock Island was like one of the biggest, not biggest, but there weren't like. Whatever 1929 or whenever it was there, Rock Island was like a happening place, and they moved that team pretty quickly, I think. So you never know. Those post-industrial towns at the time were a big deal, and they got professional franchises, and those franchises immediately moved to like Phoenix. We're also moving.
Right.
So, and where people now live. Anyway, okay, that's it for us this week. We'll be back again next week. Thank you all for listening. Go sign up for basketballreview.com. Thank you for supporting us. Thanks to all the guys there. Thanks to our producer, Corey Aldis. Thanks to Trilly Donovan. That's it for us. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.